How's it going, guys? Today we're going to be talking about 10 movies that I like that everyone else hates or dislikes. And I'm going to be challenging Chad Sabourin, a fellow YouTuber, to join me on this and do a countdown of his 10 films that he likes that everyone else also dislikes or hates. And be sure to check out his channel and subscribe to him. He does movie reviews, TV reviews. So I'll be providing a link to his channel down below so you can subscribe to his channel. Now, the movies at the top of the list aren't going to be necessarily the worst or the most hated. That's going to be closer to the bottom once we get to our maybe top 5. So these are movies that are disliked and maybe not as liked as much as other films, let's say, in a series or something. So without much further ado, let's get into this list. At number 10, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Now, I realize that most people like this film enough, but a lot of people over the years hate this movie or think it's the worst of the series. Now, the main argument that they have is that it's too dark and long and that it takes everything in the book and puts it in the movie. I don't regard the second installment to be perfect, nor do I think it's better than the first, third, or fourth film. But there's a lot to take away from the movie. These films were bound to get dark. I mean, it's about the Dark Lord trying to rule the world and finally kill Harry Potter. I mean, it's gonna get dark. What are you expecting? It still captures the magic that the first film did. It builds on the relationships and further develops the characters we grew to like in the first movie. There's a lot of information in this movie that is vital to know, especially down the line. Things we've come to understand better than watching movies like The Half-Blood Prince or The Deathly Hallows. It's a lot more fast-paced than the first and jumps into the plot without having to introduce us to the world or the characters. So it's too long. It's only 15 minutes longer than the first movie. For people that complain that the movie took mostly everything in the book and put it in the film, how is that a problem again? When things get cut out of a book in a movie adaptation, people get pissed. So now you're telling me when things get left in, it annoys people too? I don't understand why it's the least liked when you have worse films in this series like Deathly Hallows Part 1, which was, yes, 30 minutes shorter, but 2 times slower. Or Deathly Hallows Part 2, which felt interrupted, rushed, and not as epic as it should have been. Seriously, that final confrontation isn't even that great. I would argue that the battle in the graveyard was far superior in Goblet of Fire. Chamber of Secrets is the longest of the entire series. But the first 2 films had to get the world and the characters set up well, which is why it was necessary for these movies to be lengthy. There's just a lot of lore and rules to establish. So yes, there's going to be some exposition. Number 9, Jaws 2. Let's not compare it to the original Jaws. We all know nothing will probably beat it. So, does that mean we shouldn't make any more shark movies? No. Well, there's plenty of them are still made. Are they good? Not really, but they can still be enjoyable. Yes, Jaws 3D and Revenge are hated more than Jaws 2, and rightfully so. But why is it that Jaws is so disliked? I find it to be a mildly entertaining shark film with lead Roy Scheider back once more as Chief Brody. It feels like a continuation, and the deja vu feel is a good idea for a story that basically is a rehash of the first. Yes, when comparing it to the first, I can see why it could be disliked. The teenage kids sometimes get too annoying. The shark is on screen a lot, which shows a lot of not so great effects. But it has some good moments, and it's a fun watch. I don't see the over-the-top Sharknado films being hated as much as this film. It's not bad for a B-rate shark film, and honestly, I find it better than the majority of the shark films that do come out. It's better than The Shallows or The Meg. It might be even the second best shark movie ever made, so is it all that good? It's okay. I certainly have no problem watching it when I see the first Jaws. Number 8, Star Wars, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Now, when it first came out, people loved it, then they hated it, then they hated it some more, and prior to The Last Jedi and Solo, it was still hated more so than those who thought it was good. Now, it's easy to poke at all the problems with the movie. Yes, it still suffers from forced dialogue and not the greatest effects, and sometimes action that doesn't look organic but choreographed. But it's still a lot of fun to watch, and had some great character standouts. The story is the best part about this film. It's what connects anything we loved in the original trilogy to this prequel trilogy. The ending is really strong, whether it's the gut-wrenching scene with the executing Order 66, or witnessing Padme's fate, or even the confrontation between Obi-Wan and Anakin on Mustafar. Any scene with Senator Palpatine was tremendous, excluding the stunt double scene. And John Williams brings his A game with a phenomenal score that sets the tone for this entire film, making the film feel as grand as its epic conclusion. Number 7, The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey. It's really challenging to come back to Middle-earth and make something even more superior than a trilogy that had it all. Expectations, I believe, are what drove most of the hate for this first film. I generally think the first film was a great setup for the next two installments. The performances are strong, Martin Freeman really shines as the main lead. The film has an adventurous feel to it with a hint of darkness looming. Bilbo meeting Gollum was a very satisfying, fun part of the film. The movie brings the book to life very well. Unlike the original, there's, more CGI, but the first film, it's not in your face like, let's say, the third film, The Battle of the Five Armies, which was overdone and felt like they were cutting corners. Overall, I know it's like no film in the original trilogy, but it was a very good start to a trilogy that unfortunately kind of went off the rails at the end. Most people hate it as a trilogy, but if you just stop and look at the first film, it isn't all that bad. It's another movie that surprises me that it's as good as it is considering last-minute decisions made by the studios. I did find it odd that a small book like The Hobbit could make 3 films out of it. I mean, it seemed to me that 2 would have just been the sweet spot. I enjoyed the film and was on board to see the next one, which was a bit worse, but I still it kept my interest, and I think we should just try to lower our expectations because there was a lot done right and a lot that could have been worse to truly hate it for. Number 6, Godzilla 1998. Now, by no means am I saying this is a good movie. It's actually kind of bad. But the hate this film gets is more than I think it deserves. Yes, it's a big dumb action film with a hair-thin plot, it's got outdated effects, awkward humor, not the greatest acting, weird casting, and defies the laws of physics, but how is that different from any other late 90s film that doesn't receive so much hate? Take Face Off, 82% on Rotten Tomatoes. Air Force One, or Independence Day with 75% on Rotten Tomatoes. Why are those films not bashed for their over-the-top action and ridiculous plots? The problem, I believe, stems from just the title of the film. Had it been called something else, there'd be far less expectation for this movie. People wanted a Godzilla movie. It ended up with a reptile dinosaur movie. I don't know, maybe people weren't ready for another dinosaur movie following the Lost World of Jurassic Park a year prior that disappointed. I had more fun watching this than the recent 2014 Godzilla film that couldn't even show us the monster until the last 20 minutes of the movie. It's a monster movie. Where's the monster? That's what people wanted to see, after all. They aren't supposed to be deep, thought-provoking films. I admit it has tons of issues. It's too comical to be taken seriously. I don't think it was ever intended to be. It's entertaining. The action scenes sometimes work. The humor doesn't most of the time, but it's still fun to laugh at how ridiculous the plot and characters behave. You got ideas like Chernobyl worms in there. That was a pretty hilarious scene. Unless you're a die-hard Godzilla fan who was insulted with this film's portrayal, I don't see how it is that hated. It's miles better than, let's say, Batman Forever, which I think is a bad movie, but it's still entertaining. I'm not insulted. Other Batman films exist that do justice to the character, so it's hard for me to be boiling mad at its existence when other depictions exist. As for Godzilla, I haven't seen all the old ones, and I'm not a huge fan, but the 2 modern ones that I've seen, I'll watch this one over the 2014 version until they give us something better, and I still have to see the new one, but as of right now, I'd say this is actually not that bad of a movie. It's pretty entertaining despite all the hate that's surrounded it. Number 5, Peter Jackson's King Kong. I am surprised at how many people dislike this film. Is the movie perfect? No. I have some issues with it, but I find it to be an entertaining and visually spectacular rendition of King Kong to date. The motion capture work is done brilliantly for its time. There's a real sense of chemistry between Anne and Kong that make this movie work. It's because of them that you care. The score by James Newton Howard adds to the feel of the movie, making it an epic retelling of a more or less simple story. The first hour is a bit slow, and yes, the movie could have been shorter. There is some noticeable green screen with a dinosaur stampede. And yes, there was no need to have that many dinosaurs in a movie. Jack Black is a bit comical, but I think that was partially intended. Some people really dislike Jack Black, and some found Adrien Brody's character boring. That didn't bother me that much. What is it that makes people hate this movie? Has Peter Jackson raised the bar so high that we have to hate any of his work that's not up there with Lord of the Rings? It seems to be a common theme with Peter Jackson, which I don't understand. You know, when he directs his movies, they're all over like 4 hours long, and then he's got to come down to be, 3 hours or 2.5 or whatever the studio wants him to. You know it's going to be a long movie regardless. Length is not what should be driving the hate for this film or any film. Give me some reasons why I should hate it, because of right now, I mainly hear that it was hard to sit through and they didn't like Jack Black. That's not enough complaints to hate this movie. Dislike it? Sure. Number 4, The Lost World of Jurassic Park. Here we go again with a film that gets a lot of negativity for not living up to its predecessor. Judging this film alone, why does it receive so much criticism? I mean, we have a really well-rounded cast that does a good job and sells their characters. And in fact, it's a more lively ensemble of characters when compared to the first. In the first film, we had a fun monster movie, where its sequel went on to tell us something more. That these aren't just bloodthirsty monsters running around a park for no reason. They are living things that also are protective of their children. It gives us reasoning, and yes, in doing so, the film gets a little bit of a campy vibe to it. I mean, we have a dinosaur running around California looking for its kid. It's silly at times, but the movie still has much to impress. Whether it's improved special effects, a darker tone, more cool dinosaur action, it's a more fun Jurassic Park film that is much different from the first one, where the first one focused more on magic and the awe of the park itself and what it held. This film wanted to find a way to shift the focus on the dinosaurs. And it was still an exciting film with a lot of suspenseful elements, and the characters were likable. I enjoyed this film a lot. Number 3, Prometheus. Many Alien fans were not pleased to see the result of this film, some calling it drawn out, boring, and having too much exposition. And while it wasn't without its glaring flaws and some plot turns that didn't make complete sense, it was a new, fresh idea for an exhausted franchise. One of the reasons why some of the biggest franchises today are as big as they are because they took chances to do something new instead of making the same tiring product. Take, for example, movies like Terminator 2 or Aliens. They didn't just copy and paste pre-existing ideas. You essentially had people in confined spaces running from aliens in all the movies, but no idea about anything related to the alien world itself. I commend that Prometheus chose to take this route. But the fan backlash made the director Ridley Scott abandon his original vision and make a generic alien film in Alien Covenant, while quickly wrapping up the unfinished story of Prometheus that was supposed to be told over a trilogy. Yes, it's an unfinished product. It's not a standalone film. But people didn't want to wait to get answers. All people wanted to know were, where are the aliens at? You wanted non-stop alien action? Watch Aliens or Alien 3. Because even the first Alien only has the one alien. The movie has a lot to take from it, and an interesting story that generates questions. It's got amazing visuals, good acting, and an enlarged alien universe. It might not be liked, but to be hated, it's a bit much. Number 2, X-Men: The Last Stand. The X-Men franchise, it's become a mess, and some claim that X-Men: The Last Stand is to blame for this. I can understand the hate. A lot of people wanted these series to continue beyond 3 films, and Last Stand just disposed of so many characters, and it was kind of hard to continue after that. I'm not sure what they were thinking, but it seems as if they weren't going to make any more X-Men movies after that. So, do 3 films, and that's it. Kind of like every other trilogy. But when you look at the X-Men franchise, are any of the other X-Men films really rewatchable? X-Men Origins is not good, and it's really hard to watch. The Wolverine feels like a standalone, which isn't bad, but when you remember the ending, you question if you would ever watch it again. First Class is good, but I wanted to see where they would take it, but unfortunately Days of Future Past came in to ruin it. It's fun, sure, but continuity-wise, it's a mess. Apocalypse is pretty generic and boring. Logan is good, but it's far different from any other superhero movie that has come out, and it's, again, almost a standalone film, not so much an X-Men movie. So when I watch X-Men, I'm more likely to watch the first 3 of the franchise. X-Men: The Last Stand is satisfying enough. For one, it's the original cast. It's got a lot of groundwork that's been already placed. We are invested in the characters. Kelsey Grammer as Beast is great. The idea of people choosing if they want to remain mutants or take the cure is a compelling story, especially for Rogue, who struggles to further a relationship because she can't touch someone without killing them. The action works really well, special effects have improved drastically, it feels more epic than any of the other two films, it has a darker tone that elevates the stakes. Now the world is more aware and in danger. There's a lot of memorable moments that highlight some good in this film. Watching Wolverine trying to kill Jean at the end of the movie invokes a lot of emotion because we want Wolverine to survive and in a way for him to save Jean as well. Magneto's reaction to Xavier dying and realizing that the damage that he's done with the rise of the Dark Phoenix is disheartening, as well as Magneto turning his back on Mystique after she accidentally loses her powers because of the cure. The movie took risks, and sometimes it worked, other times not so much. Of course, the film's got problems, whether it's too many storylines happening in a movie, especially for a finale film that shouldn't be setting up anything that hasn't been established. The love triangle between Iceman, Pyro, and Rogue does feel shoehorned in there for no reason, and the ending raised a lot of questions that never got answered. Well, mainly because there was no sequel. Now, when I watched the film in theaters, I never saw the end credit scene, and I admit it's stupid. If you're going to kill off Xavier, just kill him off. Don't give us this twin brother nonsense. I disregard end credit scenes. They only exist to get us excited about what's to come. And giving Magneto his powers back at the end of the movie also makes the cure kind of pointless. Unless his power was so strong that it's coming back, I don't know. The movie has its problems. But considering all the issues on set, it amazes me that it's still an enjoyable film to watch. Don't hate X-Men The Last Stand. Hate Bryan Singer for abandoning the final X-Men movie and about Dark Phoenix and going to work on Superman Returns. I can understand the hate for this film, but I still enjoy it and would watch it over all of the other X-Men movies since then. Before I unveil my number one pick, there are some honorable mentions I'd like to address. Batman v Superman. Main complaints were that it was too long, serious, and dark. I had no problems with that. Just some character decisions and reveals are what hurt it for me, but by no means a bad movie. This is a broken Batman 20 years later. I sure hope it's dark. Dinosaur. Compared to other Disney films, it's not the best, but it's got some impressive visuals that hold up really well for a film that's almost 20 years old. The story's interesting enough not to lose focus with mildly entertaining characters. The visual effects are really what saved this film, and it's never tiring to sit through because of that. I would watch this over The Good Dinosaur, Brave, Minions, or Cars, yet those films get more praise. Knowing. The ending might not be the greatest, but the build-up is pretty satisfying. It constantly subverts your expectations. Sure, it's got issues, but it's more than your average sci-fi horror flick. It took some risks, which paid off most of the time. Beethoven's Seventh Symphony is a great addition that elevated the ending, despite the ending with the children. Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. I'm not sure if this one is as hated as it once was, but Terminator 3 sure had a lot of negativity around it prior to Terminator Salvation, and the last film, Terminator Genisys. So yeah, it doesn't live up to the first two installments, but it's still fun to watch despite its silliness. Effects are good, Arnold still plays Terminator pretty well, and it feels like a continuation of the Terminator story. Well, at least when compared to Terminator Salvation or Genisys. The plot is interesting enough and never becomes a bore to watch like Terminator Salvation, which took me 3 times to finally finish. The hate has dwindled, but it's not liked still to this day. Most people just ignore it, but I don't think it should be put in the same category as bad films with the last 2 movies. Number 1, Titanic. It's hard to believe that a movie that won 11 Oscars and was number 1 at the box office for 3 months, grossing $2.1 billion worldwide, could ever be hated so much. Even 22 years later, the hate is pretty strong. What is it just doesn't sit with people? Some claim it's too long. Some say it's the rich falls in love with the poor overdone trope. Others pick at the ending. So let's take a look at the reasoning behind this hate, because I can see why you might not like it, but to flat out hate it does not make any sense with the arguments given. It's too long. Let's take a look at some of these other titles that are long that should be hated because of that. Wolf of Wall Street, Hateful Eight, The Green Mile. All three 3 hours long. Return of the King and Godfather Part 2, running in at 3 hours and 20 minutes. Schindler's List, 3 hours and 15 minutes long. Gone with the Wind, 4 hours long, with 92% on Rotten Tomatoes audience score. So don't tell me length ruined a movie. You can want a movie to be shorter and have that be a complaint, but that doesn't ruin the movie, where it's considered to be one of the most hated movies of all time, because then 2001: A Space Odyssey should be hated as well, given that most people won't even get through the first act without falling asleep. Good movie, just really hard to watch, but it is pretty long. As for rich, poor romance story, there are plenty of films that have followed this overdone trope. Shall we? The Notebook, 85% on Rotten Tomatoes. Notting Hill, 75% on Rotten Tomatoes. Pride and Prejudice, 89% on Rotten Tomatoes. Cinderella, animated and live action films have done fairly well with 80% and 78%. Shakespeare in Love with 80%. Aladdin at 92%. And just recently an Aladdin movie came out in theaters. It goes to show people aren't tired of the story yet. Hell, even Star Wars, you have a smuggler falling for a princess, or in the prequels, a slave falling for a queen. When there are no huge glaring issues in a film that is this popular or critically acclaimed, then people begin to look for the smallest things to judge that they don't even criticize in other films they love. No reason to hate the rich versus poor story, especially since classes in a movie set in 1912 was pretty big because your name was your wealth. So it was important for a woman to marry into rich families to keep the first class status as seen in the film. It's not a modern love story, it works. Not saying that the script was original, but the story is good enough to enjoy. Then there are arguments that the Titanic won Best Picture, but it didn't get nominated for Best Screenplay or Acting. Okay, is Return of the King bad because it didn't get any acting nominations? Is Sound of Music bad because it didn't get a screenplay nomination? Is Braveheart a bad movie because it didn't get a single acting nomination? Is Slumdog Millionaire bad because it didn't get an acting nomination? These are all Best Picture winning films. What's your argument? You're just looking for excuses. Now, I've read some dumb things that say, it's predictable. You don't say. Others say that it was dumb to make a romance film take place in a disaster film. Why is it dumb? There were survivors. Not like everyone died on the Titanic. I guess it would be dumb if it were on the Hindenburg, where there was no reaction time to save yourself and no survivors. Is it dumb to make a romance film during Cold War or World War II? Because there's a lot of them out there. Hell, one came out last year called Cold War. There's no hate for that film. Why is that? Thought that was a dumb idea to do that. Some people say it's not realistic, and that Rose needed to move over, and that Jack shouldn't have died. So for people who didn't like the characters, you seem to like Jack enough that you wanted him to live, that you have to point that out. Literally, this is the one thing that everyone comments on. You're telling me that out of a 3-hour movie, that one little nitpick ruined the film? The accuracy? Why don't we just complain and trash every movie that isn't realistic or accurate? Again, let's go. Braveheart. Inaccurate and won Best Picture with no acting nominations. Means it's trash, right? Let's trash Pocahontas. It's not accurate. Pocahontas was only, 11 years old? So that story makes no sense. How about Gladiator or 300? JFK, The Last Samurai, every 90s action movie ever made? These are not valid arguments, picking at small problems that don't affect the story in any way, shape, or form. The movie has flaws, but it sure as hell doesn't ruin the film or warrant this much hate towards it. You might not like the film for all the reasons above, but to call it a bad movie is stretching it. The effects and cinematography alone for a late 90s film is pretty legendary. Trying to replicate the scale of the ship and everyone on board with great costume design and unbelievable set pieces seems like a great task, and it was pulled off wonderfully. The acting is good, And even though Rose isn't likable at first, she grows as a character, and you do feel for her. The dialogue can get clunky at times, but in all, everything else is so minor. The music, I guess, is cheesy, but the tune is also chilling and sad and fits really well for this film. People just get caught up with the small things and roll their eyes too quickly. It's a romance film, so yeah, you might not like those types of films, but it's a well-made romance film. Seems that people who hate this film wanted to see a shorter movie where the main emphasis was the disaster itself and the sinking of the ship. Well, then just watch the documentary. Go watch Titanic 2. I hear that did well with a whopping 15% on Rotten Tomatoes. Apparently that's what people want these days. Action films with no substance, as if there's not enough disaster films each year as it is. With Godzilla remakes, King Kong remakes, and disaster action flicks starring Dwayne Johnson, and endless superhero films. You just can't be different or you'll be hacked to death for making romance the main focus in a film surrounding a tragedy. I guess people are done with Shakespeare. Well, that wraps up my top 10 movies that I like that everyone else dislikes or hates. I'm going to leave a link below to Chad Sabourin's channel, who's going to be doing a list of his own 10 movies, so be sure to check that out, and he's going to be challenging another fellow YouTuber to do that as well, and we're just going to keep challenging people to see what their movies that they like that other people don't like. And you can also comment below what your favorite movies are that other people seem to dislike or hate down below. Let's continue that conversation. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up down there below and subscribe to the channel for more content. And I'll see you guys next time for more unboxings, reviews, and movie news.